5 years ago, it was about how fast can we scale a business? How many channels can we be on? How can we hit XYZ numbers or goals to get more funding? It's really turned on its head, since the beginning of 2020.
Welcome to the Mastering E-commerce Marketing Podcast. I'm your host, Eitan Koter, co-CEO of Vimy. In an era of rising acquisition costs and increased competition, this podcast is dedicated to helping you drive sales, engage customers, and build meaningful communities so you can turn passive visitors into active buyers. Don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss out on future content. Now let's get started with the episode. Today we're joined by Jake Levin, founder and CEO of Inflection Growth. With over a decade of experience in scaling e-commerce brands, Jake's seen it all, from being the first marketing hire at GoPuff and co-founding GettaCar, and now leading growth for top e-commerce companies through a flexible embedded team model. He's helped companies scale to 9 and 10-figure valuations and bring a sharp perspective on performance marketing, brand building, and what it really takes to grow in today's environment. Jake, how are you? Welcome.
Doing great. Thanks for having me.
Perfect. Jake, before we dive into really interesting topics about e-commerce marketing, I'd like you to share 3 words that better describe you and your belief and why.
Yeah, absolutely. First word, progression. I think everything in my life and work is about progression, and believe that, if you're not moving forward, you're moving backwards. So for me, whether it's small baby steps forward or big leaps, it's just important that I feel like I'm moving forward and the businesses are moving forward. So that's the first word. Second word would be certainty. The reason I think certainty is important is that when we're making big decisions in our lives and in business, whatever it might be, certainty is important. You don't always get it, but to feel certain and the confidence behind decision making ultimately leads to more successful outcomes and outcomes that are aligned with some of the goals that you want to hit. So third word is balance, because after kind of all of the progression that comes with that is that I've learned throughout the years that too much intensity, too much of going any way is something that can impede on happiness and impede on progression ultimately as a person. So having had a lot of different types of companies, experiences, and understanding different environments, understanding how to balance sort of the environment that you're trying to create within a business, or the environment you're trying to create within a partner relationship, how to make sure that it's well balanced between all of the progression and pushing and working, but also making sure that it's enjoyable.
Yeah, balance, such a powerful word, right? Or definitely in the business world, and having partner relation, customer relationship, team building, but also a balance in life, right? In general, right? And just to keep grinding without burning out, right? I think that's the magic secret sauce, right? That some of us are learning, right? In sometimes very hard way along the ways. Yeah. So how do you see e-commerce brands scaling? The things has changed so much, like even from a few years ago. Right? The competitive landscape has changed dramatically, and more communities, more channels, more opportunities. Well, what do you see, right now that you didn't see, let's say, 3-5 years ago?
Yeah, it's really interesting watching the landscape change, especially from the service side, because 3-5 years ago, it was about how fast can we scale a business? How many channels can we be on? How can we hit XYZ numbers or goals to get more funding? It's really turned on its head, since the beginning of 2022. It really started with a big economic drop, but we've seen more and more that companies are very focused on the fundamentals of business, which for a lot of my career wasn't necessarily the case. So where it used to be, you scale up revenue so you can get more funding and worry about profitability later, we hear more and more we need to hit a certain contribution margin. We need to make sure that we're hitting certain ROAS goals in order to be able to spend more. So it's quite literally flipped. And as a result, we're not seeing the bulk of businesses out there that we used to. It used to be a dime a dozen of this segment or that segment. You could find a ton of different ones, but unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, the cream sort of rose to the top, and the businesses that actually had good products, good marketing, good messaging, were able to relate to their customers and execute properly, have maintained, they've stayed in business, but also grown. However, a lot more steadily than it used to be. And I think companies are finally comfortable with that.
Yes. So it requires to learn new things, right? More on the operational side of things, nitty-gritty stuff, inventory, profitability, how to manage things, which channel to choose. I mean, just getting more smarter, probably use data in a much more, way. Well, what do you think about data analytics these days? I know that attribution is broken, right? It's one of your famous statements, right? And why do you claim that it's broken, and what to do instead?
So a lot of people are familiar with the famous changes with iOS 14 years ago, and just privacy laws in general, and how they've impeded, tracking people's movement for, in and out of apps and in and out of websites, as most people decline to be tracked and decline to have that information shared. So naturally posed a big problem for marketers, because we had to figure out how to still find that information and target effectively. I think a lot of the advertising platforms are a bit of a black box. You don't quite know what information they have or don't have. And if they do have it and they're not supposed to, they're not exactly going to volunteer that information. So, over the last few years since that happened, a lot of tools have come out claiming to have solved the attribution problem. But we've run a lot of tests that, show whether it be incrementality tests or, doing surveys versus click tracking versus different attribution ways of attributing sales to certain channels, and have found general inconsistencies that sort of lead us to say to any of our partners, hey, attribution is an art and a science. There's no facts. And some companies and founders are not comfortable with that reality. What we're trying to do is piece a story together and ultimately use that story to make better decisions, because, try to think of the last time you've bought something online. Have you just clicked on one button and immediately purchased? Oftentimes, no, you have a lot of touch points. You actually might go through almost every one of the channels that company's on, whether it be Meta, Google, any other paid social channel. And therefore, how do you attribute that purchase to one of those channels? It's ultimately split. So, the way that we look at it is top down, and we try to be holistic with our decision making and say, if you're making it's kind of a funny example I use, but if you're making a soup, it's a combination of a lot of flavors. It's not just going to be, one main ingredient most of the time. So you have to find the right combination of things together that are ultimately driving the results that you want.
Yeah. And obviously, if you're a big brand, you're already established name, right? Some channels are already working for you. It's just a matter of optimizing, trying to, make them better, affect the way you operate within them. But I hear a lot of brands that they try everything, right? Like from SEO to TikTok, right? To Meta, on Amazon. And nothing really is clicking fully, right? Nothing really works like it used to be, right? It's like a very, very difficult struggle to try to find out. And I'm sure you hear this also from many other, brands as well, that things are getting more difficult to activate, to operate, to analyze, to understand where to put the effort. What's the process that you usually implement? What are the steps that you usually take to try to analyze which channel works for each brand? How do you define, criteria for trying to understand, where to focus in terms of channels, or what are some of the fundamentals that you try to implement these days with brands?
First thing we look at is, where are the customers of this brand? So if a company comes to us and they sell school supplies, for example, we need to figure out where the people who would buy school supplies are. If a person fits, athletic clothing, for example, we work with a company in that space. It might be a totally different place where those people are. So ultimately, the formula for performance and growth marketing is quite simple. It really shakes out to how much you're paying for impressions and how effective are those impressions. So the less wasted impressions that we can get, the better. We ultimately just want to look at, we're in this segment, we do research, we use different tools to understand where, perhaps competitors' traffic is coming from, where they're able to get high intent traffic from. But a lot of times we're still going to try out some of the classic channels. There's not many, ultimately not many companies who have been able to still find the success on, other channels, digital channels besides, Meta, TikTok, Google. Those kind of three main channels have still provided very good results. So if it makes sense to go on there, then we're going to give it a shot, because we've also honed our strategies and skills and content creation, focusing on, the main digital channels. However, you also have to understand the company's budgets and how much they're willing to spend, because it's important, we think, to go narrow and deep making sure that you actually conquer, or get successful metrics from a channel before you try to spread your budget across every channel possible. So yeah, it's ultimately starting with the channels that we feel are going to have the highest intent customers, and trying to get initial results and moving on those channels, and then starting to implement some maybe what we would term auxiliary channels, ones that can facilitate those main channels.
And you're just adding those additional channels once you've established a good, let's say, plan for the first channel, or just wait for saturation and then move on? Well, I mean, it's more focused kind of approach, or like more.
I think that if you can build your main pillars and you have your main digital channels, and you have your, I'm talking in e-commerce, you have your CRM and your retargeting to existing customers, solid CRO, you have kind of the base. I don't necessarily look at it as a point of saturation. I look at it as an opening up of additional, raising the ceiling on all of those channels. So for example, I'll give an actual example. If a company starts on, let's just say, Meta and Google, as a lot of companies do, then eventually you're going to hit a point of saturation with the current audiences, because the algorithms are quite good at finding, your initial audience. So you have to figure out how to unlock other audiences on those channels. So maybe a platform like Pinterest, it might not get a lot of direct attribution to it, but it will open up, a door of a bunch of new customers and raise the ceiling of how much is possible on that channels. I think, the tide sort of rises all ships in that way, where the more channels that you implement, it will facilitate your initial channels as well. We haven't really ever seen it where we just ran a channel for so long that it just stopped working completely. It just kind of usually hits plateaus, and then you have to unlock a new plateau.
And just diversification on your marketing channels is so important, right? For your business, and definitely for your valuation and how investors look at it. Dependent on one aspect of the business, or just on one channel. But it's not an easy step, right? I mean, each one of those channels are, it's a community, right? It has its own, play, their own influencers, their own, best practices and rules. And it requires a lot of, working with the data and try to figure out, how to succeed in each one of those channels. It's kind of a process, definitely. So how do you balance, when you're in, let's say, performance marketing with brand marketing usually?
That's tricky, because a lot of companies, especially going back to what I was saying earlier about profitability, companies don't want to throw money at brand marketing. It's very difficult to convince them that they'll see the light at the end of the tunnel. So what I would say is that companies that are earlier stage, whether they're 0 to 1 million or 1 to 10 million, these are typically companies that are going to be ultra focused on metrics driven performance marketing. And it's going to, frankly, from our experience, it's going to be hard to convince them to do bigger brand plays. Even things like, podcasts or larger media buys, things that I've done in a lot with my past companies that were very heavily funded. However, once you get past 10, 20, 30 million, ultimately those founders are going to have to be able to be okay with setting aside a brand budget, because the way to really take it to the next level and become a household name, you need to do it.
Yeah.
And we feel very strongly about that. And we've seen companies get up to that $40-50 million place, refuse to do the brand side, only want to continue to do same thing they've always done that got them there. And what happened, they ultimately kind of get lost in the shuffle and get left behind. So, but I think that doing it right away can be risky, because you can end up spending a lot of money that maybe you don't have. And as a result, sort of putting yourself in a difficult financial situation.
Yes. I totally agree. This is, just making decisions about, as you said, brand versus performance, but also how much you invest in top of funnel, middle of funnel, bottom of funnel, right? Because you want to just, if the whole objective is just to sell as much as you can, right? And just squeeze that cash cow as much as you can. But this is a very short-term, probably, perspective. And one of the problems of any businesses today, right? There's so much intensity and focus on profitability, and it's not something easy to balance, right? And this is definitely where I see companies and brands need a lot of help. So how all these topics that we've discussed and the changes is influencing team building and the marketing team and the marketing departments, right? So what's important mix or traits or characteristics for a good marketing team, or some of the expertise that, the members of the marketing team need to have these days?
Yeah, in marketing teams in the past, there was high specialization where people could have, only skills in one platform or one area of marketing on the creative side or the performance side. We've found that, in order to solve, the business's growth goals or issues they might have, is ultimately diagnosing, area gaps or areas of difficulty. And I always felt, and when I started, Inflection, it was really important that everyone was cross-trained. So, we really go out and try to find people who can balance left side, right side of their brain, have an analytical, marketing is very analytical, but also very artistic. So can you understand both? Maybe if you're on the design team or on social media team or something like this, if you're more of a creative person, we still need you to be able to understand data and how your decisions are ultimately impacting the business's goals. And then on the flip side, if you're on the performance team and you media buy, but you have no idea how the creative and aspects to the actual, advertising that goes out, is impacting the results, that's also bad. So, our team really focuses on being able to have both sides of those businesses talk to each other and understand all facets. So, my recommendation when you're building a team is to try to look for people that are able to understand both left side, right side, analytical side, creative side. But, you still obviously are going to naturally have people who are focused on one side or the other. But, if you run into people who are just fundamentally not able to understand, the data side or the creative side in e-commerce growth marketing, at least, I look at that as, probably not a good fit.
Yeah, probably have this flexibility and agility mindset, right? To test things and just, kill them as fast as you can, if possible. Just talked to a brand yesterday and they tried so many things, right? On organic and paid. And this lady, she tried to convince her management to start a podcast. They said, no, it's like the brand marketing, right? It's not important right now. And it took her like 6 months to do that. And eventually she got some, not budget, but time, right? Spent a few hours. It took her 1 month. And just on the first interview, right, on her podcast, she was obviously very nervous. She just, been introduced by that interviewer to one of the, today, their main business partners that is generating, or affiliate partners is generating so much, right, of the revenue. So sometime I think you need to allocate, probably some time or budget for just experimentation, right, and try things and see how they click, right? It's so important because you never know. So you worked in GoPuff and GettaCar. Tell us some of the, lessons, you learned from these experiences on these companies.
Fortunate to have many, positive and not positive, just on those journeys, GoPuff, being the first employee there and, helping the business grow from very young to, a nationwide service. It was an incredible experience, especially early on in my career, because ultimately I was just learning from failing and learning from, stumbling and falling, and the company was growing so fast. It was a rocket ship. And especially during these times when a lot of the startups in that space especially were, getting a lot of funding and you're able to try a lot of things. So, I think from first lesson was just being able to, as you said, being able to continue to have the appetite to test new things and to really grind. I think what a lot of people don't understand, and could be frustrating for me talking to a lot of founders, is that, they say, oh, okay, you grew that business, 4, 5, 10x year over year, and you were able to see this magnificent growth. Like, what channel did you use? And I would always respond, our investors would ask us that too. How do you replicate that? Relentlessness and just continuing to grind is something that's not valued because it's hard to quantify. What does grind mean? What does being relentless mean? But if you're out there every single day, and we started in Philadelphia, if you're literally in person out there every day talking to people or at events or doing every single maybe little interview that you can, or partnering with every small business, eventually it's going to start to show. It's going to build on top of each other. And I think that's something a lot of companies nowadays in sort of the 2020s don't have after COVID as much appetite to get out there into the real world and actually interface with the customers. And I've been strongly suggesting, if not begging, to some of our partners, you need to be out there. You need to be out there. You need to show an actual physical presence. So I felt like with GoPuff, one of the biggest facets to its success is that we were physically present on college campuses, at concerts, at festivals, and people felt that we were, a local company, even though we weren't. They felt that we had this connection to their community because we were there. And it was very difficult. It was a lot of hours, a lot of physical labor, but ultimately I think that it was a really big game changer for us to grow as a business. So I think that was the main thing that one of the main things I took away from the marketing at GoPuff that I think helped the company grow a lot in the early stages. And with GettaCar, I always think back with GettaCar to I've listened to all these founder stories, and there's always that point of things got really difficult, things were about to collapse, and then I made this decision, or we did this, and everything turned around. For 2 straight years in that business, I just remember everything going extremely smoothly. And I always would think, the other shoe will fall or something's going to happen. And even going into COVID, we had to shut down, state mandated, because we weren't allowed to deliver cars to people. And, when everything sort of came back online, everyone wanted to buy a car because no one wanted to ride public transportation. So we were having the best sales in the company's history. And lo and behold, we hit a supply issue. If you're familiar with the car industry, there was a huge supply issue with microchips and just basic parts to build cars. And there was a huge supply shortage, and it was slim pickings to try to get inventory, and it ultimately put the company in a very difficult financial situation. And I think that, frankly, had we had more challenges earlier in the company's life cycle, maybe we would have handled that situation better, and the company ultimately would have survived. But I think that it was actually to our detriment that everything went so smoothly. So I would say to anybody out there, embrace those challenges and those days where you say, I don't know how we're going to continue this, because I've never heard a successful founder that hasn't gone through that at least once. So it's you have to kind of look at it as an expectation, not as something that it should be avoided.
Yes, of course. Like this, crucible. I mean, you need to you think everything is going to drop, right? And just enthusiasm is fading, and challenges are showing up like on a daily basis. And you just need to just keep going, right? The only one who are fail is those who actually stop, right? And there's obviously a solution to anything. But when you raise funds and you have investors, they have like a zero tolerance. They want you to spend the money, make it or break it, and that's it, right? So I think it's kind of a different kind of scenario if they're bootstrapping or raising funds and you have investors. And also, I'm very interested to have your perspective on the agency model, right? So we have the traditional agencies models, and we have what you call an embedded marketing model. Can you share more about this model? How do you see the future of relationship between brands and other service providers?
Yeah. So having spent the first 7-8 years of my career in these startups, living and breathing them every day, I had the appetite to start to try to work with more brands at once, and I was able to join as the CMO of a CPG focused D2C agency in New York. And, I came in obviously with no agency experience and saw sort of how siloed all of the different parts of the business were, and tried to implement that cross training I was talking about, because ultimately what I was seeing from the inside of an agency, and I never liked working with agencies when I was at startups. So why don't we try to implement some of the things that need to be changed? And the challenge that I saw after a year at that business was, when you're on the brand side and you're trying to grow a startup, even when you have funding, the marketing team's always struggling to get all of the hands or all of the positions that they need. And, whether it's another media buyer, a designer, someone for affiliate, whatever it might be. And ultimately they end up trying to fill that gap or bandage it with an agency. And when they go to the agency, they say, okay, wow, this company look at all these companies they've grown. They have amazing growth stories. You talk to the founder, head of sales, but then ultimately get put onto an account manager with, a couple junior people with them, what we call pod structures. And this is the traditional agency model. And, I worked with some very talented people at our agency, some very smart people. But the challenge was that when you want to grow the agency, you have to bring on more businesses. And when you bring on more businesses, people's time gets spread very thin because our cost of goods is people's time. So your most talented people get spread really thin, and they can't assign enough of their own mind space and time to actually solve some of the issues in the business or dig deep enough to solve these issues. And then you also have to compete with all of the other services out there to hire other good people who are very expensive, and maybe the quality of the people on the team drop. And I would find this very challenging, position being between a rock and a hard place where I have to hit my own agency growth goals, but ultimately still hit the growth goals of these businesses. And they were kind of pulling against each other. So I went to the CEO of the business. I said, from what I'm seeing, the companies that were doing the best work for it, or were actually making the biggest impact, or are when our top people are day-to-day involved in these businesses and they understand all of the different channels, and then they're able to have the more mid-level or junior people help with the execution. Maybe we should just do that. We called them growth clients, if you will. And they were people who worked across all of the different facets, the marketing side of the business. So there wasn't interest to change the business model there. So I started Inflection with the idea that there has to be something in between an in-house team and an agency, something where you're able to work with really experienced people on a day-to-day basis, ones that understand cross-channel and basically the full funnel from top of funnel marketing down to the website and CRO and everything in between. And then they have the team to actually support and execute those things with them. So I was not, for myself, obsessed with growing into the biggest agency possible. I thought if I can find a handful of really good partners, we could be their partner for a long time and set up incentive-based programs where we're actually growing as we grow them. So after almost 4 years, we feel like it's been successful. For the first time in my career, it wasn't about building some billion-dollar business or hitting some crazy numbers. It was, again, about balance. And it was finding something that was really gratifying and really, made us feel like we were making impacts on these businesses while still obviously growing our business, but a lot more steadily. So we're trying to go narrow and deep with each company. We've made investments in a lot of them ourselves, and we consider ourselves true partners. And as a result, we've worked with them for 2, 3, 4 years. And, it's really amazing when we get to really understand every part of the business, even outside of marketing, and help them solve those problems. And they're able to work with, a very experienced team without having to pay a crazy amount of salaries or work with multiple agencies.
Yes. So it's more just less the number of partners or customers, more going deep, right? And just taking a more active role, with the day-to-day, life of these businesses. And Jake, what are some of the services that you provide, as part of the agency?
We started off with performance marketing. So we're doing media buying and, email, basically driving performance, driving ROAS or CAC for businesses. Implemented a creative team because we would run into the issue where the companies weren't providing us good enough creative, and we wanted to be able to control our own destiny with some of these platforms. So built our own creative team, have a web team where we build websites and landing pages. And then we also have an affiliate influencer team that helps us with UGC content or affiliate marketing.
Right.
Beyond that, we do bigger media buys when necessary. I was able to learn a lot about that with GoPuff and GettaCar. But I would say with our businesses, we mostly focus on those main pillars of web, media buying, creative, and then analytics, are obviously important too, attribution and analytics.
Got it. Interesting. So how our listeners and viewers can find you, right, in the agency?
Yeah, sure. So feel free to check us out at inflection-growth.com. And you can also email me directly at jake@inflection-growth.com. Happy to chat if you have questions on how to build a marketing team. We're always willing to give advice on that. Definitely, if you can build one in-house, that's amazing, and make sure that you hire the right people for the right time. But if you need support as well, getting to the next inflection point, if you will, we're happy to help and chat.
Amazing. Jake, anything else you want to add?
No, I think that we're in a really interesting time, and I think that there's a lot of opportunity out there for businesses that have really good products and good vision. So don't be shied away because of other stories that you've heard. I believe right now is a really important time to take your time and grow incrementally rather than trying to explode like some of the stories in the past. And I think what that allows you to do is grow more healthily and not take investment too early, be able to control your business. So there's a lot of opportunity out there.
Jake, it was a pleasure having you here. Super interesting. I wish you all the best, and thank you so much.
Great. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to the end of this episode. If you found this episode valuable, please subscribe so you won't miss any of our future content. And if you could share this with just one person, it would make all the difference. Are you looking to accelerate your sales with the power of shoppable video? Explore Vimeo, the video commerce platform that includes live shopping, shoppable video, and social commerce capabilities. Visit Vimeo at www.vimeo.net, that's VIMMI.net, where you can start with a free-for-life package. We appreciate your support and look forward for bringing you more valuable insight in our next episode.